Welcome to the NuriEdge Podcast, where neuroscience meets leadership and real-world performance. I'm your host, Lacey Mathews, along with Mariana Merritt. Our guest today is Rick Griffin, founder and CEO of the NeuroLeadership Academy. Rick has spent over 4 decades studying neuroscience and more than 2 decades translating that research into practical tools for professionals. With a master's in education and a reputation as a skilled trainer and speaker, Rick's spoken to thousands of groups nationwide on trauma-informed leadership and de-escalation. Rick, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
We are really, really excited. And in fact, let's jump in with some thoughts about the brain under pressure. So, can you tell us what actually happens in the brain when a manager or an employee faces a high stakes moment at work, like a difficult conversation or a performance issue? And how does the timing of those moments, support, or why does the timing of support in those moments matter so much?
Yeah, wow, that's a great question. I think it really needs to be prefaced by understanding what the brain is attempting to do. The brain is trying to help us survive. It's running all these systems. You know, we've got a heart and lungs, so it's trying to run all these systems for the sake of survival. And so, too often we think that it's reacting to the situations in front of us, but it realizes that survival is too essential, and by waiting to react, it's too late. And so it really starts to predict. And I think it's the prediction that really makes the biggest difference is how it's predicting. So those moments, the moment before and the moments early in that prediction, before that prediction locks down, is really essential. If you wait until the prediction is already locked in, then that's when people are reacting and you see the behavior. But if we can move upstream enough and understand that what the brain is doing early, that it's just simply trying to do the best it can to how do I survive with the capacity that I have and what's going on in this moment. I think we start to see some of those things start to be more clarified, especially in the workplace, because we typically see the response and the reaction, and we start judging and really start leaning into that reaction. But the brain is really predicting it, and that moves it upstream enough to have some much more beneficial um, influences or interventions.
Absolutely.
Gosh, Rick, I've had the pleasure of following your career for some years now, and every time I get the benefit of being in conversation with you or hearing conversation, I feel like the way you explain things is just so clear. Um, Thank you for that. I definitely think you're right. Like those behaviors are what ends up in an HR report. But if we can meet people early upstream, I love the vision there, the visual of meet people early enough upstream, get them that early support before they're locked in on what they think is happening, and then misidentify and then take behaviors that don't align to what could have been if we
Right.
met there early.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was really powerful the way you laid that out. Thank you. I'd love to move us into something I've heard you talk about before a little bit around bridging the gap between knowing something
Mm.
and actually being able to apply it under pressure. So, um, I, I may know something. I may have gone to a training, read a handbook, claim that I am proficient at something. Um, but can you tell us a little bit about what happens in that gap? Why does that gap exist? And what might that look like inside organizations? We have a lot of folks who listen in who are people leaders, HR leaders. And so this is just super helpful.
Yeah, yeah. So that gap is super important. From a neuroscience perspective, they look at that as a prediction error. But the brain's constantly making predictions about what's going on and what it means, and does it have enough capacity to handle what it thinks is coming. And when it gets it right, things run pretty smoothly. But when it gets it wrong, that's when we start having the problem. So knowledge is not how the brain stores the information. It really is it's the prediction of that. So just knowing something, um, it it's helpful, but it's not as critical. That's not what the brain is doing. It's not trying to just have something that it knows. It's trying to figure out, well, what do I need to do about this? in order to run these systems and keep this body alive and to keep functioning? And do I have what it takes to be able to do that? I think that gap is what's ultimately important. And I certainly don't want to geek out on you at the neuroscience, but in
We
20,
love it.
never going to be enough to talk about prediction error and a term called precision weighting and how the brain trusts what it trusts. Doesn't It's not about the information. It's not about knowing something. It's about what the brain trusts in terms of its prediction. What what do I know about how to help me move forward in this moment? And that's what it's really trusting. And I think that's why we see those issues of uh, training occurs, and we think, well, gosh, we know we train them, we know they know this, and so, but it's not about knowing; it's about being able to use what we know, and can we access it in that moment, and that's what's really critical. So that gap is not just an oddity. It is learning. That is where we learn. If there is no gap, if there is no difference between the two, then there's no learning that occurs. We have to know something and be able to put it into practice. The brain learns through experience. Information is part of that, but it's got to it's got to ask that question: what is this most like from my past experiences, so I can figure out how to navigate this? And that's where it really matters. So now, I'm a trainer, and I believe that what we say is important and information is important, but it's incomplete. We've got to be able to experience it to be able to make it beneficial for us in the moment that it matters.
Yeah. Uh, I think that this is where our paths collide in some ways. So here at NuriEdge, we also have this strong conviction that if you can help people integrate what they've learned, the years of experience, the fabulous training they just went to, if we can help them integrate it into the moment for application, that's really where you unlock that human potential. Um, so I'd love if you could break down kind of when you look at NuriEdge as a platform, and you know that we're really focused on this real-time nervous system coaching right inside those pressure-packed moments, or those moments of planning, those moments before the brain has made a locked-in prediction. Can you continue to break down, we are neuroscience nerds, can you continue to break down the neuroscience principles that you see at play, and why does that approach align with how you've been describing the brain to actually work? This anticipation of I need to keep systems alive and I need to make good choices in the midst of that.
Yeah. So it's how it does it that really matters in that sense. And so when we start looking at um, sensory input, and this is one of the things I love talking about. We have all these things going around us: what we see, what we hear, we touch. We have 11 million sensory receptors within our body, 11 million, and they're collecting information constantly. And now our brain would go crazy if it had to focus on all of them all the time, every second. So it picks a select few of which do I think is most critical for this next moment that should pay attention to, and that really becomes our focus at that point in time. And so, if you are thinking about training and you're preparing somebody, and it's not what that um, in the similar context, the brain may make a totally different decision because it's like it's focusing on a totally different set of sensory input. Now, 11 million firing every second, that's a lot. And when scientists say that we only pay attention to 40 or 50 of them, it's got to be as close to that moment where that decision is going to be happening that's going to make it really meaningful. So now it doesn't mean that it's not that it's useless to do that. So the repetition of training can matter, and but it comes down to what is the brain going to trust in that moment. And if we can get an intervention in that moment where that sensory input is most similar to uh, the issues that they're facing, too often we do all this training and people learn something, but when the moment happens, it's a different set of sensory input because now the emotions are high and we got all these other things going on. So if we're not learning in context, uh, it's it's a flip of the coin sometimes to how well it's going to stick. So when you have something like NuriEdge who does something inside the context of the moment, that is so much more helpful because that's actually how the brain works. It's the moment that matters. It's that moment before prediction is set in. And when you can influence the prediction, then you can influence where the brain chooses to send its energy and the fuel that it has for the other systems. But if not, it's going to slip into protection mode and it starts sending all of its energy to help itself protect and all the good things that we want employees to do. Uh, it's not going to be, those systems aren't going to be fueled. The fueled system is the one that says, nope, protect, put up your guard. And so it really, that energy reallocation that the brain is doing becomes most critical to understand. And so when you've got a, a product like yours that is able to say, well, let's do this in the moment and let's provide this information in the moment, that's when you're matching the sensory input most closely to when it's helpful, as opposed to 40 or 50 pieces of sensory input that aren't really effective, like a classroom. How often do the problems happen in the classroom? It's the training room is not where the problem happens. It's that conversation, and so that is when it becomes most critical. So it's a brilliant piece of work that you guys are doing, and so grateful to be a part of it because this is what is really missing in a lot of workplaces, and especially in the tool set of leaders to understand that it's what's happening in the moment that's most critical. For a long time, I know, Mariana, you know that I've got a history of working with trauma-informed care, and that trauma is really important. That past experience is really important. But sometimes you've got to realize it's not about what the brain is thinking about the past. It's what it's happening right now, what it's concerned about moving forward. And when you get information to someone in that critical moment, that's gold. That's magic. So that's really where leaders need to be focused: is how do I help my brain do something different in the moment that is critical, um, not in a moment that's where I'm comfortable and things are running well. So I often like it that remember, maybe I'm too old, but I when I was a kid, we used to draw these little things that like draw cartoons on several pieces of paper, and we flip through there to make a moving cartoon. The brain pays attention to what changed. If everything stayed the same, it's nothing's going to be really important to it. So it's going to pay attention to those changing moments. And as close as, if you can get something close to that moment when it changed, when something distracted, when a conversation got heavy, and that's what the brain is going to pay attention to. So that's when we need it to respond to information best, is in that moment when change occurs.
Gosh, Rick, all this psychological safety is leading me to want some self-disclosure. So I'm going to share what you're bringing up for me, because even as a person who has been deeply in study and in pursuit of understanding these concepts, my background is in applied social psychology. I have a master's in social work. I've done deep trauma training. I am still human. I do not ever escape the reality of being human. And this morning, I knew I had a big lineup of to-dos for work. But I jumped into Nuri, the platform, this morning and was like, hey, my husband is sick. I haven't slept well for the last several nights, because you don't sleep well next to someone who is not well. My daughter is taking a 3-hour exam right now, and my mama heart is just thinking heavy about her. I cannot focus. And so it led me through a 90-second exercise that just you speaking about how many stimulus input are constantly being registered by the body. And it told me to do this signal to focus exercise where you really identify what is noise and what is signal. And signal is like, hey, you need to start taking action on this. And noise is all the other. I was mildly offended because I was like, well, my poor husband isn't noise. But in this moment, he was.
Right.
Right? I cannot do anything for the man. He has taken his meds and he'll be okay. And there's nothing else I can do. It is just noise if I continue to listen to it. I cannot do anything for my child who is testing miles away. It was such an anchoring experience, even as a founder, even as a person who is deeply committed and connected to this work, to recognize that, like, yeah, in that moment, I needed the extra support. I couldn't facilitate the support for myself. And sometimes I can't co-regulate. Lacey is my founder, but I can't ping her every time that I'm like, I'm so distracted. That's just going to distract her.
Yeah. Because what you're needing to support is something different. If you're waiting till after the moment to offer support, you can still offer some support, but you're supporting something different. Because in the moment that support is needed, it's a support to how do I deal with this? The reality of that, I don't know if I've got enough to handle what's happening right now, and so. Well, that's great to be able to talk about it later, and it's really helpful to have a Lacey in your life that you can call up later on. But that's a different support. What the genuine support that is needed in the moment is much different, and I think that matters a lot more when we start thinking it out. Um, Again, I don't ever want to come off as saying that it's not helpful, that other support is still helpful, but not nearly as helpful as the support with what you need to deal with it in the moment. The brain is not asking, what is this? Is what is this most like in my past? And do I have enough energy and enough fuel to run the system to handle this? And when it doesn't, and that's why I think the confusion, even around like resilience and skills, it's like you can teach people skills, but if they can't use it in the moment, it doesn't really matter. If they're not fueled enough to run those systems to even recall some of that information that they stored away, it's not going to happen. And so we need to even start looking at resilience in a different way and start looking in terms of what prediction is and what brain energy is all about. Do we have enough resources to run the systems that we want ran? And Mariana, I know you and I had talked about this, but in the past, in terms of we use the language of hijacking our amygdala, and sometimes people might assume that means something is shut off and I lose control. And the reality is, it's just an allocation system that we need to say, nothing's shut off. You just sending your resources to a different place in that moment. So
Like that.
that's the moment that you need the support, because it's like, no, I need some more fuel to run the right system in that moment, not wait until the moment has passed and then try to refuel. That doesn't help. When you run out of gas, you don't say, okay, I'll just drive to the gas station and then get filled up. So no, there's a moment that you need to be refueled right then in order to progress. And I think that's what we're talking about, that Nuri has the opportunity to give you fuel when you're out of gas in that moment, not to have to wait until you can get resources later on.
Oh my gosh, that's so good. And I love what you said about the prediction element of that, because taking it a step further, if we don't get that fuel in the moment, we lock in predictions that are not good.
Right.
Like, I had this negative experience, I ran out of gas. I have now reinforced, I'll never drive again. I don't want it. I feel horrible when I think about it. I loved what you were saying about just the predicting of something, because we're tying it to what have I most closely experienced like this? And then when we think, like, what if, because it's true for us all, some of those most close experiences were really traumatic.
Yes. Yes.
And so now we're in this place of, I'm trying to predict, and I don't want to tie it to this really negative trauma that I have, but I don't have other tools and facilities because I've allocated all my resources to surviving.
Yeah. It's those
And-
old systems that take a lot less energy to run. It's the newer things that we've learned that take a lot more energy to run, a lot more fuel to run. And so when we start getting stressed out, when we're under pressure, the brain it's going to start to conserve energy, and it'll start running those older models. And so even if they're harmful, because it's the easiest, it's the most cost efficient system to run in that moment, it's not energy efficient enough to run some of those high protocols like good judgment and good decision making. Those take a lot more energy than just those old systems that I already know well. And that's what gets frustrated. We know that that's not the right thing to do, but our thinking becomes narrow because we just don't have enough energy to access some of those other systems. And with that understanding, interventions can change. And I think that's really the key is, can we find interventions that can help us refuel when we need refueling, and not just assume that it's just that, well, we taught somebody that, so they'll know, they'll be able to use it when they need it. I wish that were the case, but that we know that that's not it. Provides answers, but performance depends on the brain's ability to predict what's next and what's cost efficient enough for me to operate. And so that's when it matters. Uh, Great if I have the answer, but if I can't use it in that moment, it's kind of like when we were in college when we used to cram for tests, right? You guys are probably way too bright. You probably never did that. But when you cram for, you might be able to do well right after that and right in the moment. But long term, we know now that none of that, most of that's gone because it takes too much energy to try to hold on to all that for too long. It can do it for small periods of time, but it can't later on when it might be needed at another point in time. When we understand how the brain is doing this all, how is it learning? How is it collecting information? How is it operating when we get most stressed? That then we can provide interventions that are most helpful in that moment. So, and that's why I couldn't say enough about what you all are doing, because that is such a critical understanding, and so few leaders understand the importance of that. Uh, we spend millions, probably billions of dollars in training and learning development, and it's all helpful. But in the moment, when people can't access it, there's some that just throw away. I mean, literally say, "Oh, it didn't work when I needed it, so that must not be any good." So no, it's still good. You just needed something different in that moment, and so applaud you. Thank you for doing what you're doing, and thank you for this opportunity to talk about what I think is, I really think is a missing element in our leadership development, is that idea of prediction and brain energy. No matter how many skills you have, if you don't have enough fuel to run those systems, those skills aren't going to matter in that moment.
Absolutely. I have one more kind of question that ties to that I want to bring in and land us with. Although truly, we would love to have you come back about 18 million times, because I now have so many things I want to dig into. But in the moment, there are a ton of real life stressors happening right now: wars and military conflicts, gas shortages, large scale layoffs. There was recently an article in Harvard Business Journal, kind of describing that a lot of employees are experiencing this freeze response, especially at work, and kind of ties back to like the resources have gone somewhere else and now we're frozen. How do you think, given that like our global context is pretty intense, to put it mildly, how should companies like think about some of those realities of like, are there times when organizations should kind of reconcile that human need as more or more important than what we previously thought of in kind of the wellness category? If the world's going to go crazy, how as a company can we support the humans in it?
Yeah, if we want people to be effective at all, we certainly need to consider the humanness of it. And I know that it might sound hyperbolic, and I am a little bit biased, but when we understand that that issue of capacity, when somebody is so distracted, when they're sending fuel to try to deal with all this uncertainty of the job, of my finances, of possible war, you're sending a lot of resources to all this uncertainty. You don't have any left, and so freezing is conservation at its best. It's energy conservation. It's saying, no, don't move, don't do anything, because you don't have the energy for it, and so we can't be effective. So if organizations can learn about brain energy and how we are fueled, and what takes away the distribution of that fuel, if we can learn to understand that and learn to manage that better, and learn to help people think about, okay, there, I get it. There's a lot of uncertainty, but here's a better way to deal with uncertainty so that you have enough fuel to do something else. Yeah, Stephen Covey, in a book a long time ago, said one of my favorite lines. He said, "The most important thing is to keep the most important thing the most important thing." And so we're spending all of our energy on all these things that we can't control. We can't do much about. Mariana, it's kind of your story today. Your husband, you can't do much about that today. We got to learn to not spend so much energy on those things that we can't do much about. And so we can keep it for the things that are most important. So from an employer's perspective, if you want somebody to be efficient and effective, you have to find a way to help them understand how to manage their energy, and say, if I let you if you just worry about and all the uncertainty that's out there, you'll be dead, in terms of that, your battery will be dead every day by the time you get to work.
Yeah.
I need to help you find ways to manage that resource well, and find ways so it's not only a resource allocation in terms of distribution, it's production. How do I help you produce more energy? And that's one of the things like lots of resilience skills don't teach. Meditation doesn't, that's a resource allocation issue. It's not a resource production tool. So we need to help make sure people have resource production. How do they have produce more fuel in their body so that they can use it in other ways? And so I think that's the most critical piece about neuroscience is understanding the difference between a fuel distribution and fuel production and fuel consumption. And great organizations will be able to manage that. That's human behavior. I mean, to me, that is the future of human-centered behavior, is understanding what the science says about those things. Otherwise, all the things that we want humans to do aren't going to be able to be done, or worse, be done in a much more destructive way, because they're going to be running patterns that are easier and simpler to run, which are not as helpful to the masses.
Oh my gosh, I can think of immediately, like off the top of my head, a few patterns of my own that I have reinforced in some of those moments that I'm like, all right, what's really amazing to know is that you can break that reinforcement.
That's right.
You
Yeah.
can change that. Such good stuff, Rick. I would keep you on forever. But we do want to give you a little of your life back. Thank you so much for joining us today. It has been such a privilege. If for anyone listening, anything in this conversation has resonated with you, made you think a little deeper, or perhaps gave you some interest in checking out NuriEdge, we'd love to hear from you. You can find Rick, Mariana, and I, and NuriEdge on LinkedIn. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you.